I still remember the exact shade of James' eyes when we first met, a mix of blue and green, like the ocean under the bright summer sky, full of promise and mystery. That's how I fell in love with James, my husband, the man who would become both my strength and my weakness. In those early days, everything was beautiful. James was kind, affectionate, and full of dreams that we planned to fulfill together. Our wedding was a small but joyous affair, filled with laughter and the warmth of our closest friends and family. But among the faces of joy, there was one that stood out, watching with a different kind of gaze. Evelyn, James' mother, her eyes, unlike her son's, were cold and calculating. Even then, I sensed a shadow, an unspoken understanding that Evelyn's approval would not be easily won. After the wedding, James and I moved into the family home, a sprawling estate that had been in the family for generations. A house filled with antiques, memories, and Evelyn. The decision to live with her had been a difficult one, but it was James' wish to keep the family together. "Mother has been alone since Father passed away," he'd said, his voice tinged with a sorrow I hadn't seen before. "We can't leave her all by herself." So we moved in, hoping that our love would be strong enough to withstand whatever challenges lay ahead. But nothing prepared me for life under the same roof as Evelyn. Evelyn was a woman of exacting standards. From the way the table was set to the time dinner was served, everything had to be perfect. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, and her tongue was even sharper. "Naya, dear, is this how you fold the napkins?" she'd ask, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let me show you the proper way." James would watch silently, his eyes avoiding mine. I knew he was torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me, but in those early days, I still believed that love would prevail. As the weeks turned into months, I worked hard to adapt to Evelyn's ways. I cooked, cleaned, and played the dutiful daughter-in-law, all the while keeping my doubts and discomfort hidden. It will get better, I'd tell myself, looking out at the sprawling garden that had become my sanctuary. I just need to be patient. But deep inside, I knew that the house was changing me. I was no longer the carefree girl who had fallen in love with James. I was now a woman caught in a web woven by Evelyn's greedy, cunning hands. The garden's flowers, once a symbol of hope, now seemed to mock me. They bloomed in defiance, vibrant and free, while I withered under Evelyn's watchful eye. And so, our new beginning became a test of endurance, a game of patience and perseverance, a game that I was determined to win. Little did I know then how high the stakes would become. Life in the grand old house settled into a rhythm that pulsed to Evelyn's unspoken commands. Her presence was felt in every corner, her gaze a constant surveillance, even when she was not in the room. James began to change too. His laughter, once so free and easy, became rare, and those ocean-like eyes seemed clouded. We were still newlyweds, but the intimacy we'd shared was slipping away, replaced by a distance that I couldn't bridge. "Maya, dear, don't you think it's time you learned to cook James's favorite dish the way I make it?" Evelyn would say, her voice dripping with condescension. Her words were a maze, always leading to the same point: her superiority, her control. "I'd be happy to learn, Evelyn," I'd reply, my voice steady. But inside, my heart ached for the days when James and I were enough for each other. James's silence was the most painful. He saw, but he didn't intervene. He heard, but he didn't speak. His mother's will seemed to be his command. "You must understand, Mia," he'd say late at night, his voice soft and pleading. "Mother has her ways. She doesn't mean any harm. But does she have to be so critical, James? I feel like I can't do anything right." He'd hold me then, his arms strong but his resolve weak. "Give it time, love. It will get better." But time didn't make it better. Time only tightened Evelyn's grip. Her demands became more exacting, her criticisms more biting. Every aspect of our lives had to meet her standards, from the way I dressed to the friends we saw. "James never liked those people, dear," she'd say, referring to my closest friends. "You should spend more time with our family friends." The house became a fortress, and I felt trapped. The beautiful rooms, once filled with promise, now seemed like gilded cages. The garden, my sanctuary, became my escape, the only place where I could breathe. But even there, Evelyn's shadow followed. "You spend too much time out there, Mia," she'd say, her eyes narrow. "A wife's place is with her husband, taking care of the home." I look at James, hoping for support, but his eyes would be elsewhere, his thoughts a mystery. "I'm trying, Evelyn," I'd say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to be a good wife." Her smile was a cold victory. "Keep trying, dear. You'll get there someday." The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. And the joy of our new beginning became a distant memory, overshadowed by the reality of life under one roof with Evelyn. I still loved James, but I began to doubt our future. His mother's influence seemed unbreakable, and his loyalty to her was unshakable. "I won't give up," I'd tell myself, gazing at the unyielding walls of our home. "I won't let her win." But even as I said the words, a chill of doubt settled in my heart. Was it a battle I could win? Was it a battle James wanted me to win? The house, once a symbol of our love, had become a battleground, and I was fighting alone. The first sign of my illness was subtle, almost unnoticeable, a faint dizziness that I dismissed as fatigue. Life with Evelyn was a constant battle, and I assumed my body was simply reacting to the stress. But then, the dizziness grew into nausea, and the fatigue became a constant companion. I found myself unable to finish meals, my body rejecting food in a way that puzzled me. "Mia, you must eat," James would say, concern finally breaking through his indifference. "You look pale." "I'm fine, James," I'd reply, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired, that's all." But Evelyn's eyes, always watching, seemed to gleam with a satisfaction I couldn't comprehend. Her comments were laced with insinuations that sent shivers down my spine. "A woman who can't take care of herself can hardly take care of a home, James," she'd say, her voice dripping with feigned concern. Perhaps I should take over the cooking. Her offer was a veiled threat, and I knew it. But my strength was waning, and my resolve was crumbling. As the weeks wore on, the symptoms grew worse. I was trapped in a cycle of sickness that seemed to have no cause. Doctors were puzzled, tests were inconclusive, and my body continued to betray me. "Something's not right," I'd tell myself, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was drawn, my eyes hollow. Something's happening to me. But what and why? Doubts and suspicions began to creep into my mind, fueled by Evelyn's smug smiles and cryptic comments. "Perhaps it's the stress, dear," she'd say, her voice oozing with false sympathy. "Living up to my standards must be hard for you." Her words were a dagger, twisting in my heart. But they were also a clue, a sign that something more sinister was at play. One day, as I sat in the garden, weak and weary, a thought struck me, a thought so terrifying that I couldn't breathe. Could Evelyn be poisoning me? The idea was ludicrous, a figment of my fevered imagination. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Evelyn's control, her obsession with perfection, her disdain for me, it all pointed to a motive. But how? And why would James allow it? I wrestled with the questions, my mind a whirlpool of fear and confusion. But the answers eluded me, hidden behind a veil of deception and lies. I remember that day like it was yesterday, the day the truth came crashing down, unveiled in a moment of cruel serendipity. It was a typical morning, the sun filtering through the heavy drapes, casting a golden glow on the polished wood of our dining room. James was at the breakfast table, his eyes buried in the newspaper, his face showing the wear of a troubled night. I was in the kitchen, my body still weak, but my determination strong. My suspicions of Evelyn had turned into a silent obsession gnawing at me, urging me to act. But I needed proof, evidence that would convince James, evidence that would convince James, evidence that would free us both from her twisted grip. My mind was lost in thought when James's phone rang, its sharp trill cutting through the silence. I glanced towards the dining room. my heart skipping a beat as I saw the name on the screen. It was Evelyn! My instincts screamed at me to listen, to seize the opportunity that had presented itself. But my conscience held me back. A voice whispering that eavesdropping was wrong, James answered, his voice tense. Yes, Mother. I strained to hear, my breath held, my body frozen. His words were a murmur, a tantalizing glimpse into a conversation I longed to understand. I moved closer, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. I knew what was wrong, but the need to know was overwhelming. Why are you asking about that, Mother? James's voice was sharp, his words tinged with an anxiety that sent a chill down my spine. I crept closer, my ears straining to catch Evelyn's response, but her voice was a distant hum, her words lost in the vastness of the room. Why is the wife still alive? Evelyn yelled, but she didn't know that the phone was on speakerphone. James's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. My heart stopped, my mind reeling. Her words were a sledgehammer, shattering my world in an instant. He continued to speak, his voice a mixture of confusion and fear, but I couldn't hear. I couldn't think. The room was spinning and the walls were closing in. My husband, my love, had been a part of it. He had known, he had been complicit. And I had been blind, so blind. I stumbled back, tears streaming down my face, my body racked with sobs. The truth was out, and it was more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. Evelyn's laughter echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of her victory. She had won, and I had lost everything. The phone call ended, and the room fell into silence. But the silence was a lie, a facade hiding a truth too terrible to bear. James looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and in that moment, we both knew. There was no going back, no pretending that things could ever be the same. Our love, once so pure and strong, had been poisoned by Evelyn's wickedness, and we were both to blame. The days that followed were a blur, a surreal haze of anger, betrayal, and determination. The shock of that fateful phone call had left me reeling, but it had also ignited a fire within me. I was no longer the naive, trusting wife. I was a woman scorned, a woman wronged, and I would fight for justice. James was a broken man, his complicity in Evelyn's wickedness weighing heavily on him. His eyes, once filled with love, now held only guilt and shame. I never wanted this, Mia, he'd whisper, his voice choked with tears. I never meant for you to get hurt. His words were empty, his apologies hollow. He had chosen his mother over me, and there was no going back. The legal battle was long and arduous, a maze of deception and lies. Evelyn was a master manipulator, her cunning mind twisting the truth to her advantage. But I had the truth on my side, and I had the truth on my side, and I had evidence that would bring her down. My lawyer was a sharp, determined woman, her eyes filled with a passion for justice. She saw through Evelyn's facade, and she believed in me. We will win this, Mia, she'd say, her voice filled with conviction. We will make them pay for what they've done. But Evelyn was not one to be underestimated. She fought back with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Her lawyers were ruthless, her defense relentless. She's a liar, she'd proclaim, her voice dripping with venom. She's trying to destroy my family. Her words were a knife, cutting deep, but I refused to be cowed. I knew the truth, and I would not be silenced. The courtroom became a battlefield, a place where truth and lies clashed in a war of words. Witnesses were called, testimonies were given, and the evidence was laid bare. The poison, hidden in the food, had been slow and insidious. Evelyn had planned it carefully, her twisted mind reveling in the suffering she was inflicting, and James had been her pawn, his weakness her weapon. The trial dragged on, each day a battle in itself. The media caught wind of the story, and the spotlight turned on me. My face was plastered across the news, my story dissected and analyzed. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to let Evelyn win. I took the stand, my voice steady, my resolve unbreakable. I told my story, the truth laid bare for all to see. I loved him, I said, my eyes meeting James's, his face a mask of pain. I trusted him, and they betrayed me. The courtroom was silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Evelyn's eyes were cold, her face a mask of hatred. But I saw a flicker of fear, a crack in her armor. The verdict was delivered, and the gavel fell. 10 years in prison, a sentence that was both a victory and a loss. James and Evelyn were led away, their faces pale, their futures shattered. I watched them go, my heart aching with a grief I couldn't name. The battle was won, but the war was not over. The scars ran deep, and the wounds would never fully heal. I had fought for justice, and I had won, but I had lost so much more. I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high, my spirit unbroken. The sun was shining, a new day dawning. But the shadows lingered, a reminder of a love lost and a battle fought in the shadows. After the trial, the world seemed a different place. The house that once held laughter and love was now a silent monument to betrayal. The walls seemed to echo with memories, whispers of a life that was no longer mine. James's absence was a void, a gaping wound that refused to heal. People say that time heals all wounds, but time only served to deepen the scars. I had won the legal battle, but the emotional war raged on, a storm of anger, grief, and loneliness. My family and friends rallied around me, their support a lifeline in my darkest moments. They saw my pain, my struggle to rebuild, and they were there, holding me up, helping me find my way. "I'm here for you, Mia," my best friend Sarah would say, her eyes filled with empathy. "You're strong, and you'll get through this." Her words were a comfort, but they couldn't fill the emptiness, the sense of loss that pervaded every aspect of my life. I threw myself into my work, losing myself in the routine, the familiarity of the daily grind. My job became a refuge, a place where I could escape the shadows of my past. But the past had a way of creeping in, a way of reminding me of what I had lost, what had been taken from me. Months turned into years, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fog began to lift. The pain was still there, a constant companion, but it was no longer a consuming force. I began to see glimpses of a future, a path towards healing. I found solace in helping others, volunteering at a local shelter, giving back to those in need. The smiles of gratitude, the simple joy of making a difference. It gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of connection. And then, one day, I met someone. His name was Mark, and he was kind, understanding, and genuine. He saw me, not the broken woman I felt I had become, but the strong, resilient person I was. We started as friends, a connection built on trust and shared experiences. Our relationship grew, blossomed into something beautiful, something real. "I see you, Mia," he'd say, his eyes filled with warmth. "I see your strength, your courage." His love was a balm, a healing touch that helped me find my way back to myself. Life moved on, and I found joy in the simple things, the small moments that make up a life. I found love built on trust and respect, a love that was pure and true. I realized that I was more than my past, more than the pain and betrayal. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I had reclaimed my life. The shadows were still there, lingering at the edges, but they no longer defined me. I had emerged from the darkness, stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever came my way. I had rebuilt from the ashes, and I had found hope, love, and a new beginning.